You have to get away.
Mm.
Mentally, sometimes it's not enough. You physically have to get away and step away, create the sort of person you want to be, and then maybe you could go back into that system. But
How do we live a life that's more drama free?
we make healthier choices. Sometimes we are reacting to what's happening to us in a way that is not well for us. So we have to really think about, how do I want to perform in this situation? How do I want to exist in this relationship? It is not them changing. Perhaps it is me changing the way that I respond, react, look at, expect, all of those things. It's on me.
Hmm. And so where does that where do our the patterns come from? Like
Mm.
our responses to various stimuli and the ways that, in which we view the world. I mean, like where do those originate from?
Family.
Mm.
That's a big part of it. And another part of it is our personality. We are the way we are, whether we're adventurous, we run away from confrontation, we're agreeable. That's all a part of us. And we have to figure out how to work with these different parts. Sometimes we will say, I don't like confrontation. It's like, but do you like low conflict?
Mm.
Because you may have to have a bit of confrontation or a difficult conversation to have low conflict overall. So we don't have to look at like, I don't like this one thing. It's, what is the bigger picture?
Yeah, that makes sense. You've done like a lot of education around boundaries.
Mhm.
What's the deal there?
Mm. Well, I think that boundaries is how we become more clear in our
Mm.
relationships. Usually, when we have an issue with something, it's a boundary issue. We're not talking about what we want, what we need. I just had an issue at work and someone sent a long email, and I'm like, I still don't know what you're asking for. I don't know what you need or what you expect. So, can you put that in one sentence? Grateful for the three paragraphs, but how do we get to the point of, can you do this thing tomorrow?
Mm.
Sometimes we're talking, we're saying a lot of stuff, and we're not saying anything that a person can understand. We're in these relationships, they're not deep. We're in relationships talking about stuff, but there's no connection. So we have to get down to the nitty gritty. We have to talk about the things that bother us because I want to be in a relationship with you. And if I want to be in a relationship with you, shouldn't you know that I don't really like to go to this restaurant? Like, there's so many others. Maybe you could accept that part of me and we can decide to have something different together. But to pretend that we like certain things, that we don't care about certain things is really a disservice to ourselves. And it doesn't put us into deeper, more connected relationships.
Mm. How do we bring up difficult topics?
Well, I have to tell you, there is no perfect time and there is no perfect way. I think the best time to bring it up is when you're thinking about it. The worst time to bring it up is in front of other people. When someone is going through a crisis, those aren't good times. But in terms of like good timing, there may not be a good time. Like, are
Mm.
we waiting on like weather, temperament, like all of these things?
Yeah.
I don't know when all of that sort of comes together. So we have to get to this point of, okay, I have to say it. And that is when you find yourself constantly thinking about it. They do one more thing and you're like, ah, that's the time to say, okay, here's the deal.
Yeah. I mean, you've been doing this for so long. Are there themes that come up again and again? Like, issues that present in relationships that are, I guess, more common than others?
Mm, more common issues. Here's one. I think for adults that becoming an adult phase is really challenging when you need your parents in a different way and you start to um, build your own life and maybe you don't want to go home for whatever holiday or you want them to come to your house or you have kids or you have a partner and you're really an adult now and they're
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, let me tell you everything you need to do because I've been an adult longer. That's a really difficult part for adults. I think there are lots of uncomfortable conversations to be had. I would also say, just going back to that one a little bit, when you have those life transitions. So, as you get into more serious relationships and you start to blend with your partner's family and your partner starts to blend with your family, more things come up because they're like, yo, your mom is overbearing.
Huh.
And that could have been great for you for years. Like you didn't even know. It's like, well, she calls me 4 times a day and she helps with it could have been great. But once you're in a relationship, it's like, that's too much. Like we're at the movies. Your mom is calling,
Yeah.
So you have to think about those things at that time. So that's another one. And I would say most of us have like these deep issues that we hold this resentment for that we really haven't spoken to in our relationship.
Mm,
Whether it's, I feel like my brother is a favorite. And every time I see, my parents interacting with him, I get a little annoyed because I see them catering
mm,
and they don't do that with me. So there are these things that we've been kind of looking at for, 30 years, 25 years, however old we are. And it's like, it just keeps picking and having that conversation sometimes. It's not to change the person, but maybe to highlight that I see what you're doing.
mm,
And this is how it impacts me. It makes me feel like, maybe when I do something great, it's still not as good as me do as my brother doing it or my sister doing it. You just say, "Oh, good job." But if they, walk up the stairs, it's like, "Oh my gosh, look, he walks."
yeah.
So, people have those issues and just expressing it sometimes can help that other person see like, "Wow, maybe I am doing something or at least I'll, be mindful
Hmm.
of what I'm doing."
Wow. Yeah, it probably stems from some like early childhood trauma. And then every time they see that, it's just like reopening the wound again and
Mhm.
again and again,
Mhm.
unless it's like addressed.
Yeah.
What's the goal then with addressing it? Is it to forgive?
Not necessarily. I think it's to release.
Mm,
To think about something constantly and the other person doesn't know about it, to just put it out there, it takes it out of your mind a little bit. So I think of it as a release. It's not, maybe this is how you feel about this other person. I just want you to know I see it. Maybe this is something that you can't change. I just want you to know this thing. And then there are other times where maybe you don't even talk to the other person about what the issue is. You never talk to, your parents or your sibling and say, here's my issue with you. Maybe it's something that you work through internally because this is how this person is. They're not willing to change it. And I need to show up in this way with this person.
hmm. Is there a way to differentiate whether it's like something worth bringing up or not? Not that it's whether or not it's worth bringing up, but like whether bringing it up is going to be productive.
Mm. We never know what's going to be productive, but I do think about the history of that relationship. Has the person been receptive
Hmm.
to this sort of information before? Would this information be helpful for the relationship or would it cause more conflict? Would them knowing at least make you feel better if they don't do anything about it? Or is your expectation to get them to change? Are they ready to change? I think of people who may have family members who have some level of addiction. It can be very challenging
Mm.
talking to a person who isn't very present, right? So you're bringing this issue to them and they're like, I don't even remember you saying that.
Mm.
So that's pretty challenging. You can say it, but I do wonder what your expectation is there. Sometimes when family members may have, maybe some mental health issues and they're not getting help or they are getting help and they're doing the work they can, but they're still impacting the relationship in some way. Will having that conversation change them? Maybe, maybe not. So there are so many factors we have to think about when we bring information to people that some people can't hold certain information and some people will reoffend you or reharm you in you delivering the information.
Mm.
Um, I know sometimes when people experience trauma with a family member, they want to say, well, your abuse caused this. And then the person is like, I didn't abuse you. That didn't happen that way. And it makes them feel worse.
Mm.
So you have to think about like, How do I want to feel after this exchange? If you can handle this person denying your reality or saying they're not at fault and it's your fault, then have that conversation. But if you feel like having that conversation is going to further harm you, there are other ways to heal without them being a part of that healing.
What are some of those ways?
Therapy, you
Hmm.
mentioned that. Doing a lot of that self work without them releasing you to be healed. How do you have that memory of what the situation is and also create new memories? Also, look at, the good and bad parts of the relationship. Decide to forgive them for some of the things that they did when they were unwell. How do you start to do that without the other person saying to you, I apologize?
Hmm. I love in your new book, Drama Free, you talk about forgiveness, and one of the things that you say is that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean forgetting.
Hmm.
That you can actually live with a trauma, but that doesn't mean that that you're not going to be able to necessarily erase it from your memory, and therefore that's not necessarily a practical goal.
Hmm.
But that forgiveness is something that um, anybody can really do. Am I characterizing that well?
I think so, and it's not for the other person. I think we seek that sort of freedom. We look to them to give the abuser, the afflictor of pain. We look to them to say, "Now release me from your grips," and they're like, "What grip? I didn't,"
Yeah,
Or it's like, "Okay, you're released,"
yeah.
and it can be helpful. I'm not going to say it's nothing. It certainly can be helpful for some of us, but when a person is vindictive or mean or gossip or abusive, I'm not sure that their apology is going to reform the relationship
Yeah.
because some of those qualities people repeat again and again. And if they're truly going to apologize, they also have to change the behavior. I know I grew up with a standard of when you hurt people, you apologize right away. So you
Mm.
kick your sister, is like, sorry, then you kick her 20 minutes later, right? The
Yeah,
apology culture. We
got it.
we over apologize. It's like, oh, sorry. It's like, I'm not really sorry. I wanted that to hurt her.
Wow, and you grew up where'd you say you grew up?
Detroit.
Detroit, wow. And
Yeah.
you still live there?
No, I'm in Charlotte.
Oh, you're in Charlotte.
Yes.
Got it. Love it. Yeah, I was trying to remember if I'd ever been to Detroit, but, I think I probably passed through. But yeah, it's, I feel like people that cause trauma aren't necessarily aware of that fact, you know?
And it's hard to accept about yourself, right? To live with you being the person responsible for someone's pain, to see yourself as that type of person. Some people can do that, but not many. I've heard very few mothers say, I was a bad mom. I've heard very few
Mm.
fathers say, I was a bad dad. I've heard tons of kids say, I had a terrible mother. I heard tons of kids say, I had a terrible father. My siblings are, I don't hear people acknowledging. So I'm like, well, where's the other half?
Yeah.
Where's the other half of people? So it's not like people are like, you know what? I'm ready to accept these bad parts. People can pull together the parts of themselves that reinforces who they want to be, right?
Mm,
It makes them better able to live with themselves
mm.
because I may not be able to live with myself as someone who neglected you. I may not be able to live with myself as someone who didn't always consider your needs when they were important or didn't attend to your feelings and that
Mm.
sort of stuff. But I can say I worked really hard and I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And also that, like, people that cause trauma sometimes do so I unwittingly, like, inadvertently,
Mhm.
and they're not necessarily bad people.
Mhm.
Like, we've had a few conversations on this show, about, like, childhood trauma and the fact that, like, nobody gets out of childhood trauma-free. Like, everybody has some degree of trauma, right? There's, like, big T and little t, and that sometimes the people who are, you know responsible either directly or indirectly aren't. I mean, they're not doing it intentionally. You know,
Mhm.
they're not partaking
Mhm.
in your social injury um willingly necessarily, or you know, with you know, awareness.
You're a byproduct of their level of functioning.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what led to you writing this book? Were you just kind of, yeah, what was the genesis of it?
With Set Boundaries, Find Peace, I found that so many of the comments about the book were, "But what about if it's my family?" So
Mm,
many things like, "How do I make exceptions to the boundaries for my family? How do I know you wrote this wonderful book about boundaries, but how do I change my family?" I'm like, that was a boundary that you can't change people.
mm,
So, I think we need more information about the power that we hold in the ability to change our relationships with other people, the power we hold in the ability to not be in those relationships in some instances, or maybe speak to people less frequently or tell them what we need. Like, we have so much power. And I think when it's family, it's like, okay, I have to make all of these exceptions. This is the thing I have to do. When in actuality, we need to almost reconfigure some of the relationships. We need to have heavier conversations. We need to talk about different things.
mm. Yeah, because people tend to think that like family members ought to get a free pass.
Oh, yes, they get a free pass. I had a post not too long ago. And gosh, it was a listicle. And I was saying something in dysfunctional families, this is the norm. And the first thing was like illegal. It was like using I was talking about financial abuse, using a child's information to get bills, which so many people in the comments was like, "This happened to me when I went to college. I already had this bill and I couldn't get this thing." And
Wait,
I'm like,
what is that?
taking your child's social security number and getting a light bill or a credit card bill and
People do
not
that?
paying it. Yes,
Wait,
yes.
why? Like, what's the purpose of that?
They don't have the credit to do it.
Oh, interesting.
They don't have the credit to do it. So then they put in the child's name. And when this child grows up and they're ready to move out, they're like, wait a minute, I've had a water bill since I was 8.
That's insane.
That is but here's the thing. So many of the people never prosecute the family. There is still a relationship with this person, but that is financial abuse.
Their credit's shot.
Their credit is shot. Or if their credit is not shot, you're working so hard in that early phase of life where you're going to college or getting your first job or trying to get an apartment, and you walk into a $3,000 bill.
Yikes.
Yeah. So I think sometimes when we think about family injury, we do think of like abuse, neglect. Yes, no, but there's so many other things. You think about sibling relationships. I've heard so many people say, my siblings bullied me. Not the people at school. My sibling was the person at home, making it hard for me. My sibling would gang up on me with my dad, or my sibling would, all of these things, and we're still in these relationships. And the undertone of the relationship is, this is my bully.
Mm,
This is the person who stole my credit information. This is the person who, um, when they got a boyfriend, they stopped taking care, whatever those things are. And it still shows up in our relationships with the people and in our relationships with other people. If you have low trust with your family, guess what's going to happen when you start dating?
mm.
Guess what's going to happen when you start making friends? I'm sure you've met a person who says, like, "Oh, I don't get along with people. I don't like, I don't have a lot of female friends. I do better with guys," or I don't, all of this stuff. And I just wonder, how's your relationship with your mother? Do you have any sisters? How are those relationships? Because there is this bleed over effect that, I couldn't trust them. I can't trust any of them.
Mm, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's like, what was your childhood like? When people
Yeah.
have those like weird preferences, you know?
Yeah.
There's this have you ever heard of this YouTube series? It's called Soft White Underbelly.
No, tell me about it.
It's it's crazy. So the it's this video project created by a guy named Mark Leta, who's like an LA based photographer. He used to work like for brands, and he was tired of his work with brands where everything has to be perfect right in front of the camera. And so he just decided to like break free and drove down to Skid Row, set up a studio there, and started doing these extended video interviews with people living down on Skid Row, which is like an immense homeless population in LA, probably the largest homeless population in the United States, maybe even in the world.
Mhm.
And interviewing drug addicts, meth, fentanyl, like people that are, um, prostitutes, pimps, gang members, people with like all kinds of like tattoos all over their face and things like that. And the interesting thing is that not a single one of them has had a good childhood. Like
Mm.
they all come from crazy
Trauma.
trauma in their childhoods, you know? Like really intelligent people too. Like he'll have people on who are amazing storytellers. They're lucid. They can talk cogently. Like they're people who have it all put together, but they've got this source of just like
Pain.
unyielding pain.
Pain.
Yeah.
Before I was a therapist, I was a juvenile probation officer in Detroit.
Wow. Tell
It
me
was
about that.
one of the saddest jobs I ever had because you have these teenagers and they're still in cars or selling drugs or, committing these crimes. And when you look at the families that they came from, it was like, it's like, I think I should just keep you locked up because I don't want you to go home.
Mm,
I don't want you don't have any protection, you don't have a parent who's, maybe going up to the school, even, for things like to get your report card. Like, the probation officer would have to go to the school to get the report card because the parents wouldn't go. You would have these kids who were behind in school, they didn't know how to read, and they're, like, 17, and, the parent is like, "Oh, he's just stupid." I'm like, "He's 17 and can't read? Like, I think there's something else going on." So you would just have these cases where it was like, "This is so sad,"
wow.
because it was usually like this family environment where they couldn't thrive, and you would send them to, we call it placement, it would be, military school, and they would do so well with the structure, so well with the staff that cared about them. They would become, great. They would get to grade level. They're in all these groups. You see their personalities coming out, and you send them back home.
Wow.
And then it's like, okay, my kid has gone AWOL. I can't find him. He's been missing for a month. And,
Mm,
just all of these problems. And I'm like, the issue is sometimes not necessarily the parent, but the parent doesn't have the resources. I don't think that person wants to parent in that way. I wonder, like, this is probably a step up from what
mm,
they experience with their parents. So this is like a generational sort of thing because you would have grandparents and not parents sometimes. So you would see like, wow, the
mm,
whole the system. We need more support. And the support is like, okay, for certain populations, we know like there needs to be more support in schools. There needs to be more social supports in elementary school. We need to start like at the hospital, giving people resources. We need more parenting classes in general.
mm,
We need, there's so many things. And I don't think people are trying to be narcissistic. I don't think they're trying to harm their kids or not care about their kids, but they have to first learn to care about themselves.
mm,
They have to learn how to be honest with themselves. They have to learn what trauma is. They have to learn what neglect is. They may think they're doing a great job because they're doing a little bit better than what was done for them. And
mm.
so without having, education and information, it's hard to label someone as like all bad or all this. It's like there are so many things that happen in people's lives where, the parent is abusive and these sorts of things. And it's not an excuse, but it certainly is information about why they chose this path.
Yeah. I mean, as an adult with that degree of trauma, do you think that's something that could ever be like transcended or or healed. I mean,
Mm.
that degree of like pain, whether it's like sexual abuse or verbal abuse, emotional abuse, neglect.
I've seen it healed in people when they have support to heal. They know what healing is, the tools are available, and they step outside of that. I think of, dysfunctional families sometimes as, when you go through like AA or NA, one of their things is like, leave the environment. I think of that sometimes with dysfunctional families. You have to get away.
Hmm.
Mentally, sometimes it's not enough. You physically have to get away and step away, create the sort of person you want to be, and then maybe you could go back into that system. But being in that system, it's something about um, being in a highly abusive family and not being abuser. It's almost like, how do you even do that?
Yeah.
It's that system has to repeat, it has to continue in order for you to be in it, or, you're a rule breaker. I do think that there are people who come from those situations and they are the first in their family to, um, maybe do something differently, and you get a lot of flack for that. It's like, "Whoa, what are you doing? You're raising your kids in a two-parent home. What is this?" "Oh, you wanna go to college? Oh, you all of it becomes a problem in the family because the family is so dysfunctional, and I think that, there's a chart in there where I talk about the stages of change and how hard it is to actually change in a dysfunctional family. It's not impossible, but it certainly takes a lot of effort.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of work. It can be easier for some of us to say, I'll be like this. I will exist in this way. Alcoholism is all that I've seen. So
Hmm.
this is my coping skill, or, drugs is my coping skill. We we can do better. It's just a matter of having the tools and having the support to do better. And when you have severe trauma in your family, the support isn't in the family.
It's not there. Yeah. One of the another thing that I love in the book when you talk about how it can be difficult sometimes to change under the constraints of family because people in your family and even probably within your friend group inevitably see you a certain way,
Mhm.
right? And it becomes difficult to like break out of that brand, that you sort of have built with like whether it's your family. Weren't you talking about? Aren't you the baby in your family?
I am the baby. I have about, I don't want to count right now, but at least 10 first cousins who are 8 years older than me.
Hmm.
And so in a lot of family pictures, I'm like the baby being held in the family pictures, or, people will tell me all these stories about when you were a baby, you used to do X, Y, and Z, and I would never put you down. So as I've done stuff, their energy is still like, oh, look at little, it's very like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the baby has a baby.
It's like chronically being underestimated. Like, when does this end?
It's definitely cute, but it's it is quite funny to get a picture, someone texts you a picture like, "Look at me holding you." It's like, "Okay. I'm so grown now, guys." But yeah, I think I've seen it with siblings sometimes, particularly in households where one sibling had to care for those younger siblings, and they took on that role as, I am the little mom in the house, and you're, getting your brother up, you're getting your sister up. That doesn't just go away when you turn 18.
Hmm.
You're still highly involved in that person. It's like, did you go to school today? How was work? It's like this, I call it the mother sister.
The mother sister.
The brother father.
Yeah.
It's like they're parenting from their role as sibling. And at some point, some people want to stop that. Now, for some folks, it might be okay, but there are folks who say, "Well, I'm 30 and I don't want my sister like
Hmm.
telling me what to do anymore." When we were kids, I needed that. I needed somebody to wake me up when mom wasn't available to do it. But
Yeah.
now it's a little awkward. So how do we just become siblings?
Yeah. I love that because I have two younger brothers, and so I'm the oldest in the family, and my parents had a very rocky relationship, but they they were great parents, but and especially like in later years when my mom got sick, I very much felt like, and I was very happy to step into this role as, kind of like, I mean, it sounds cliche, but like the man of the house. My dad wasn't there, and my mom was really sick,
Mhm.
and my my mom's boyfriend,
Mhm.
um, was kind of a loose cannon. So, I mean, so yeah, so within that context, it was very, I think, helpful for the family for us each to kind of like assume different roles, and for me, it was like I was kind of like the man, that role, the man of the house. But, but thankfully, I guess I've had the fortitude to recognize when that role or where that role becomes no longer appropriate. We
Mhm.
still have, like, I'm also the oldest, so like with age comes like wisdom, to
Mhm.
some degree.
Mhm. We
um
hope.
yeah, we hope. And so, I also recognize that each of my brothers have like their own strengths and talents that I'll never, be able to have. So it's it is an interesting dynamic. It's not like all good all the time, but it's also like it's been helpful at times
So you're not
as
being the
well.
brother father anymore.
No, no.
Okay. When did you transition that?
Well, I think, well, after my mom passed away in 2018, we all kind of relocated back to LA, and then I think I felt, I don't even know if I can take credit for this, but it's just my brothers were in LA, and so for
Mhm.
me, I think it was like important to see them flourish on their own and not just being like Max's brothers in LA, because LA is very much was has always been very much like my city.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and I think that they've appreciated that because now they have like, they both have like girlfriends, and like my little brother just had a baby, so he's now in many ways more of a grown up than I am. Like I'm like stunted in my like, you know feel like in my like almost in my adolescence, but in some regards. But yeah, it's been an interesting, it's like an interesting journey, how that dynamic like changes over time.
Yeah. And it sounds like you allowed it to change, right?
Yeah,
I think the problem comes when it's like, no, you are my little brothers in LA.
yeah, yeah,
It's-
yeah,
and you're still like, managing their lives as might have kind of helped them with when you were younger.
yeah.
Um It's wonderful when we can transition in that way and when we're aware of it. Like when I have 2 kids, and when I talk to parents who are going through the empty nest phase, or, their kids are adults, it's like, I'm getting information on how to do this, right? Because it is this like letting go process that you have to allow them to call you a little less, and you won't know where they are at all times, and a part of that is really healthy for them.
Hmm.
You don't want to check in with your parents 10 times a day when you're like 40.
Yeah.
So, I think there are times when we can naturally let it go. And there are other times where we have to have those conversations and say to people, I'm not 18 anymore. And I'm so grateful for you giving me a home. But also, please stop calling me every day at 7 a.m. to wake me up.
Hmm. Yeah, the overbearing parent, that does not sound uh like fun to have. What about in the book you talk about being a cycle breaker in the
Mhm.
family? What's that about?
A cycle breaker is a person who chooses to get out of the unhealthy patterns. We talked about that a little bit earlier when you said, can people get out of this? And it's like, yeah, you can get out of it. And it's a matter of you looking at what the patterns are around you and deciding to do something different
Hmm.
about them. I think with cycle breakers, a lot of the support they receive is outside the family, or it may be from extended family members, but it's certainly not in the dysfunctional system, which can be really hard because you want that acceptance of, yes, you're doing a great job, but it's also like, you're doing a great job and you're not among us doing the things that we do.
Hmm.
So it is now a problem for us that you have these great and wonderful things or whatever you think is lovely, because it feels a certain way to us and we're not ready to change.
Hmm.
And that can be tough to see people in a situation that you deem as like, this is unhealthy. This is not how you should live. This is, not what I would want for you. And not be able to change that about people. So I think that's one of the bigger struggles with cycle breakers is, maybe being the only one or one of few to do something different and then seeing people who you believe need to make some level of change in their lives.
Yeah. What about conflict in the family? Like if, you're trying to be a cycle breaker, but then your siblings, you know, are at odds with that.
Yeah. I think we're entitled to live our lives how we want. I certainly want that for myself. And I have to remember that when I get into the mode of wanting to change other people, it's like they also get to choose their life. It may not be the life that I want for them,
Yeah, that's so important.
but it is the life that they want. And so I have to figure out what parts of their life I can be in and what parts I can't be a part of. And it's not always me saying to this person, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, because that's not very helpful. Because what if they really like to do that thing you don't want them to do anymore?
Yeah. Well, what about like as a good example, something relevant to certainly in me and my life, but probably many people listening to watching this, like when we're trying to get a family member on like a healthier path
Mm.
and they resist.
I don't think they have to be on a healthier path. That's hard. It's so hard to watch. But just like you chose a healthier path, they get to choose to not have a healthier path. And here's the thing, we wouldn't want anyone to make that choice for us.
Hmm.
Whether that is substance, because sometimes people are like, but they're abusing alcohol, they're abusing drugs. And it's like, that is terrible. And you can't make them stop. You can have a problem with it. You can talk to them about it. You can say, hey, when you come over my house, please show up sober. You can do tons of things. But what you can't do is make them stop. There are boundaries you can create for yourself in the relationship with them, but you can't make them stop. And if they could stop very easily, they would not have this problem.
Hmm.
So it's a deeper thing there that we think sometimes, oh, I just need to tell them. And it's like you're trying to penetrate something that is much bigger than who you are. Now, expressing a concern to someone, that's always kind and caring, depending on the way we do it, right? But trying to force that change or, convince them, sometimes it doesn't work in our favor. And we really have to show up in love and let them know that we care and we're concerned. And when they're ready, we are here.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I had the experience of trying to, you know, like revamp my mom's diet. And, because nutrition is something I'm super passionate about. And my mom had a chronic disease, and I was trying to do my best to clean up her diet. And there were some things that she listened to me on, but at a certain point, I realized that people are going to live the way that they want to live, and that's all good. Like that's
Mhm.
there's no judgment on that, like, and because the last thing that you would want is for them to feel that they're being judged, right?
Mhm.
But presently in my life, it's sort of that feeling has sort of like come back because my dad, who just turned 73, he's a lifelong smoker.
Mm.
He drinks like a fish,
Mhm.
and he just doesn't have the healthiest like habits. Thank God he's still around. Um, but me and my brothers we're like relentlessly trying to get him to stop smoking, even though we know that he's never going to stop smoking because this has been like a lifelong almost thing that we've tried to get him to quit. But now it's like all those lifestyle habits like are coming to roost because he's in his 70s, and it's like you're starting to see the effects. And so it's frustrating, to be honest,
Mm.
that.
And as I hear you talk about that with compassion, what I hear is he is choosing his life. And the hardest part for us is knowing that the life that someone is choosing might lead to death earlier than it needs to. That's the real hard part, if we're being honest. It's like smoking will kill you. I have parents who smoke. My mother, 2 packs a day. My dad is proud to say he smokes less, 1
Wow.
pack.
Wow. Wow.
So I get that, and I think that I remember when I was a kid, I used to tear my mother's cigarettes up, and I would, in school there at the time, remember the smoking sucks and the commercials and so I had a strong awareness of like, this is bad for you. But I would tear those cigarettes up, and my mother would go to the store and she'd get more cigarettes. And that taught me it doesn't matter that I'm tearing up these cigarettes.
Yeah.
Now I'm in trouble. And she's upset she gotta spend more
Spend
money
more
on
money.
spend more money on cigarettes, but it's not stopping her because guess what she wants to do? She wants to smoke a cigarette. That is how she's coping.
Hmm.
She's coping with the stressful day by, taking a puff of the cigarette or whatever is going on in her head. And here I am taking her coping mechanism, making it
Yeah.
harder for her. Now she wants 2 cigarettes to deal with me breaking the 1.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's it's unhealthy to watch, but I also, with cigarettes, I can't remember what country I was in, but it was kind of on the package. It says something like cigarettes kill. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
how direct is that?
Super.
But even with that, they were selling cigarettes and people were buying them.
Mm.
Cigarettes kill. It's easy for me as a non-smoker to say, why would you smoke that? I don't smoke cigarettes. So I can't imagine what it's like to have my vice that is unhealthy for me taken away. It's hard to watch, and I also think that we have to make peace with the fact that people get to choose their life, even if it's not the life we would choose for them.
Why do people choose to do things that are slowly killing them?
Why?
We ask this question in like the wellness industry all the time. Like the health information on how to eat healthy is out there. Like it's there's a big
Habit,
habit.
habit. You think about alcoholism. People, why don't they just stop drinking because they can't? And that sounds really basic, right? Like they can't. Like as your brain is like moved on to the next thing, this person's brain is like, okay, at 4 when I get off, I could just have this drink and then it hits the ice. And these are not issues you have, so you don't understand them. So it's very hard to put ourselves in another person's shoes and think that it is possible that it is hard or it feels impossible to them to stop doing this thing that is unhealthy. That's much harder than we can think of because we don't have that issue.
Mm.
If it were as easy as stopping, they wouldn't have the issue.
Mm.
There's so many things. I think about habits around smoking cigarettes, when you have your cup of coffee, when you go to the bathroom, when you have your meal, you still have to do all those things without the cigarettes the next day. So, guess what you're being triggered, 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 triggered. We don't think about that because look at me, I'm just sipping my tea. I'm not drinking it, thinking about a cigarette,
Yeah.
but, I was with my mom one time and I just had my daughter and I was like, you cannot come here and smoke. And she did it. I think she went outside maybe twice. She was so proud of herself. And she said, it's really hard with me being here because everything just makes me think about a cigarette. I'm having my coffee. I mean, she named all the stuff, and I was like, whoa. I didn't even I didn't even think about that.
Wow.
How tough that is to I'm having my coffee. Usually when I get to this point in a coffee, I'm all of those triggers.
Mm.
And here I am saying, just stop.
Yeah. No, you're right. We have to have compassion for people with those kinds of habits. I mean, certainly.
Yeah.
It's definitely difficult. I mean, I was in like an addictive relationship with a human, with a girl for many years, and so I can I can certainly relate. But I guess I've never had like a substance problem.
Mm,
So, but yeah, it's got to be difficult. I feel like in therapy, one of the things is like they don't. I don't know. Maybe you said this. I forget who I heard say this, but that therapists aren't really supposed to give you the answer. They're supposed to lead you to uncovering the sort of answer yourself. Like I do this in my own life. I have a cat. I can't force her to do anything. I have to like give her the idea. She's
Mhm.
got to, like if I want to like go to sleep, I put her on my bed, she jumps right off. But if it's like her idea, she'll jump on the bed and she'll like stay on. So I can't put her on. She's just got to like come to it on her own.
So you're your cat's therapist.
In a way.
Mhm.
She's mine too. It's a
I probably I'm
definitely a
pretty
little
sure I've said
codependent.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have this idea that if we show people the problem, "Look, this cake is the problem."
Yeah.
So, like, "Look, you're diabetic. This is the cake. It's the
Right.
problem." The person has to want to stop eating the cake.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the issue, but they're not in the mindset of stopping. So when you give someone that solution, they have to be ready to make those changes. And so when you say get in the bed, it's like, I'm not ready to get in the bed. Let me get in the bed when I want to get in the bed. Just pull the covers up and I'll see when I want to get in the bed. That's really, it's just that insinuation of something like, I'll just get in the bed, you just get in here whenever you want to. So it's you living your life, you being healthy and, offering when they come over to your house, you offer these things, but it's potentially not saying to them, your lifestyle is unhealthy.
Yeah.
But, oh, you went to the doctor? What did they say? So just asking those questions so they come up with those things for themselves that, oh, you have COPD.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So what do you say about the smoking with the COPD? Just just throwing those things in there. So they say, yeah, he probably say I shouldn't smoke anymore. Oh, you shouldn't smoke anymore.
Yeah. It's fun because it's like I get all people will message me, on social media. They'll be like, I've been telling my mom for years to quit drinking soda, but
Mhm.
she saw you on the Dr. Oz show saying that soda's unhealthy. And suddenly it was like her idea to stop drinking soda, you know? It's like you got to sometimes like leave breadcrumbs. And I'm wondering if there's like an efficient or effective way to do that.
I would say support, listen, ask questions, don't tell.
Don't tell. Yeah.
Don't tell, just ask tons of questions. Mostly in therapy, some of my clients will say, you just back me into a corner. Well, I'm just asking you questions to get you to the point of seeing what you said you don't want. Right. So I'm just trying to get you to this place. So I'm thinking about the question as you talk, and I'm like, so you want a more serious relationship, and you just met this person and they said, I'm not ready to be in a relationship. And you want to continue to pursue it. And they're like, "Wait, I did say I wanted to see." You did say that, didn't you? So, I'm using your words, I'm using you so you want to maybe stop, but it sounds like your barrier is this thing.
Hmm.
Is this what's keeping you? So just talking to people in a way where they're able to formulate their own ideas about their life. Because if we give them the idea, people are often like, "No, that's not what I want. I didn't say that," or "No, I'm not ready." But when they say it, that's when they're truly ready to do it. When that person comes to you and say, "I want to stop drinking sodas," or "I
Yeah.
want to start working out more." That's when they're ready. It's not when they've been told 5,000 times, "Hey, you should work out more. You should work out more." It's when they're ready.
Yeah, when they're ready. I feel like a lot of people today are feeling kind of lost and lacking in motivation.
Mm.
What should people do when, when they're feeling that way, stuck in a rut perhaps?
Seek clarity. I think a rut is a place to not stay stuck.
Hmm.
And we say stuck there because we're not looking for any answers. We have resolved that the stuckness is the answer.
Hmm.
And we have to think about other things. Is this the life I want to be living? Is this the place I want to be? I think about not what I wanted to be when I grew up, but how I wanted to feel, what I wanted my life to look like. Is this a representation of that? You don't have to, maybe have that job, but did you want to be a happy adult? Did you want to live a long life? Did you want to maybe have some healthy relationships? How do you do those things? And I think sometimes we can get so stuck in the thinking of, it's not possible with me. It's not possible for me. It won't happen. And we have to think about, how can I make it happen? How can I go after this thing? Life is not happening to me, it's happening through me.
I love that. Yeah, have like a model of like where where you envision your life to be, both in the in the short term, like a year from now maybe,
Mhm.
but also like the 5 year plan, the 10 year plan.
Yeah, when I was this is the second time today I've shared this story, so I must be on a roll with this one. But when I was in eighth grade, I had back surgery. I have scoliosis, and I had a spinal fusion. And I was really scared to get that surgery because I knew some adults who had scoliosis, and they were disabled. They were, like, couldn't work, spent a lot of time in the bed, going to doctors and that sort of stuff. So I thought, "Oh, this is my fate with scoliosis." But when I went to the doctor, they show you these videos of, look, she's cheerleading after her surgery. She can do all these things. And the doctor said to me, it's really about the work that you put in. You're young, you can still be physically active. And I remember making it my goal to get up, walk around, try to bend over, do all of these things so I can get back to this space. I was never a cheerleader, so I didn't need that part. But but getting back to this space of being physically active. Or I could have been like, I've got a bad back, I'm just laying in the bed.
Hmm.
So he gave me the option, like, you have a choice here. Like, you can be like this person who has back issues, or you can really, try to do some things to manage your back issues. And I was like, huh, I never thought about that. I didn't know that other people could do issues to manage some of their back issues. Not all, but the one in particular that I had, it was manageable. So just knowing that we don't have to give ourselves over to the idea that all is lost, we can't do anything about it. It's, what power do I have in this situation? What things can I do?
I love that. Take like an inventory.
Yeah.
Was the surgery successful? Did it leave you?
Yes. Well, I still have a little bit of a crooked back, but I'm fine mostly. I try to be, I think I had a few issues in high school because I was carrying a heavy backpack,
Wow,
right?
wow.
But not since then. I'm conscious of, not slumping over. I always try to sit with a lumbar pillow. I'm trying to make sure that I am taking care of my back in the best ways that I know so I don't have issues.
Yeah, I love that. Everybody apparently has some degree of scoliosis.
Really.
Like nobody's like, I mean, and this is not my expertise, but for just parroting what I've heard, because I have low back issues too. That everybody has some degree of like
Mm,
scoliosis. People like if you were to like do MRIs on 100 people, like some crazy proportion of them, maybe most of them would have like disc herniation, but like things that aren't causing problems.
mhm.
Like I have like low back issues, but uh it's like I have like, I'll have like a bulging disc or something, but like
Mhm.
people have bulging discs that don't necessarily have back pain. So it's like every nobody's perfectly symmetrical. Everybody has like different flaws. I love you know, and what is a flaw anyway? Is a flaw actually a flaw? There's a
Yeah.
Stephen Hawking quote that I love, that without imperfection, neither you nor I would exist.
Yeah.
Right? Like imperfection is a part of like the nature of life.
Yeah. I think sometimes, like if I'm putting on something, I'll have ask my husband to help with my dress or something. I'm like, help me get it over the big part of my back. It's like,
Cute.
so it's, you just live with, different things, and you figure out a way to manage it when it's manageable. Everything isn't, but I wonder how much of it is, and we're just not doing anything about it.
Yeah. And all of these, like whether it's like back problems or childhood trauma, like we have to find a way,
Yeah.
right? Forward.
It would be beneficial. It would be beneficial for sure because, you talked about Skid Row, and I think about how sad it is to know that 18 years of your life impacted 60.
Mm,
That's so sad.
that's crazy. Yeah.
or 10 years or however that, I don't know. Maybe it was the full 18, but it has impacted the totality of your life.
Mm.
I remember turning 18 and feeling free. Like whatever happened those 18 years, I'm a new woman. Like I can choose now. I don't have to talk to certain family members. I don't have to listen to certain rules anymore. I get to decide what's next for me. If I want to go to college, if I don't want to go to college, if I want to move here, like there are so many options.
Mm. So true. Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.
Can't even describe how much I had put my self-worth on that job. And so when I lost it, I started asking questions like, who am I if no one else is defining me? What is my internal status? Who exactly am I? And it really kind of made me sick.